Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Helena Lirenko, Director of Lloyd Greif Center for Entrepreneurial Studies.
Good morning, and welcome to our second annual Athena Summit. It is my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Marshall School, on behalf of the Lloyd Greif Center for Entrepreneurial Studies, and our wonderful Master of Science in Entrepreneurship and Innovation program. In the spirit of the Greek goddess Athena, today is about sharing stories of courage and inspiration, sharing wisdom and strategic advice, and showing support and strength to build the next generation of entrepreneurs. Last week, my neighborhood newspaper's cover story proudly announced that over 50% of our new Palisades Village shopping mall's businesses are women-owned. That is fantastic news. Yet, seeing that headline, I couldn't help but wonder how long it will take that would no longer be worthy of a cover page. How long will it take that we're in true gender equity in entrepreneurship? To get there, we have our work cut out for us. Only 16% of tech CEOs, tech founders are female, and only 3% of companies receiving venture capital have female CEOs. This despite data that shows that female tech entrepreneurs on average generate 35% higher returns on investment. But less than 10% of VC professionals are women. Angel funding looks a little better. 30% of investors are women, and 28% of funded teams have at least one woman on them. But we're still obviously underrepresented there too. And if you're wondering about the numbers for minority women, those numbers are abysmally low. Female entrepreneurs, like all female leaders, are caught in a catch-22. Research shows that we are expected to conform to gender stereotypes of what is acceptable female behavior. But if we do, we are not perceived as successful leaders or high potential investment opportunities. These stereotypes operate in all of us on a subconscious level, and they have been shown in studies to play a significant role in venture capitalists' investment decisions. They are often what's behind that gut feel that it just wasn't a good fit to make an investment this time. Changing the stereotypes and norms, challenging inequality, requires collective action. Collective action like today's Google walkout, collective action like this Athena celebration today. Today we foster change by showcasing role models, creating support networks, and sparking dialogue. Here at USC, our entrepreneurship program focuses on education, research, and venture incubation. We offer 100 courses a year taught by 40 professors with a total student enrollment of over 4,100. We have a specialized master's program in entrepreneurship and innovation, as well as in social entrepreneurship. And we have launched many new minors and new courses on topics such as growth hacking and global entrepreneurship. It's really an extraordinary time to be an entrepreneur here at USC. In addition to classes, a broad range of resources and services are available to students, faculty, staff, and alumni. We run several venture competitions each year, and we have 2 venture support programs, the Blackstone Launchpad and the USC Marshall Incubator. And we recently launched the USC Marshall Venture Fund, which will invest in USC-related companies. That means ventures founded by students, faculty, staff, and yes, alumni. For the first time, USC can be on your cap table as a direct investor. We teach, we inspire, we support the next generation of entrepreneurs to blaze a new path and build on the strong tradition of our alumni. As a 47-year-old entrepreneurship program, the oldest in the nation, we have an unbelievable alumni network out there. The alumni include the founders of Salesforce, Kinko's, Box, Riot Games, Ventana, Choosy, and hundreds of other companies. Today at Athena, we bring powerful women entrepreneurs and investors together to build community, to spark dialogue and focus resources on driving diversity and inclusion in entrepreneurship. But before we dive into the program today, I'd like to thank a few people who have made today happen. First, my co-director at the Greif Center, Dave Velasco, for his leadership, especially in initiatives to level the playing field for women and people of color. To Jamie Choi, the Associate Director of the MSCI program, for her vision and initiative for Athena. To Gemma Bravo, our Events Director, for planning and logistics on more than 40 events a year. And thank you to our MSCI program and its Academic Director, Tommy Knapp, for supporting Athena. And I'd especially like to thank the small and dedicated team who filled the room today with expertise, guests, and speakers. Many of you are here because you were invited, bribed, or cajoled by our alumni, Robin Ward and Susie Rue. Susie is doing wedding duty, but Robin is here. Thank you, Robin. We will hear from her later on the investor panel. I also want to take this opportunity to thank and recognize our center's main benefactors, Lloyd and Renee Greif. Interestingly, the goddess Athena's bird was the owl. The owl is also Lloyd's bird. The owl is the emblem of Lloyd's investment bank, Greif and Company. We are very proud to be the first entrepreneurship center to be endowed by an alum of its program. Please stand to be recognized, Lloyd. Thank you. So thank you all for being here and being part of this movement. I hope you enjoy the day. I hope you meet new people. I hope you're inspired to work for entrepreneurship, for your own ventures, to help others on theirs. Fight on. Now let's get this show on the road. For our first discussion of the day, we have the early stage startup panel. Please welcome to the stage Greta McAnany of Blue Fever, Daniela Corrente of Reel, Ara Katz of Seed, Amy Wan of SageWise, and our moderator, Amy Nelson from Riveter. Welcome to our early stage startup panel.
Welcome, everyone. It's really exciting for us to be here today to talk with you. All of us are early stage founders, which is a place I'm sure many of you are in or thinking about being in soon. So I wanted to be able to walk through all of your journeys with you today. Before we get started, I thought it would be great if you could each tell us your name and what your business is in about 30 seconds, if that's possible.
Yeah, totally. What order? Want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Good? Yeah? Great. I know it's early. My name is Greta McAnany, and I am one of the co-founders of Blue Fever. My co-founder, Lauren, and I started Blue Fever because every day, millions of women spend 7+ hours online and on social media, trying to solve their emotional needs. And we created, it's true, and we created a product that is an empathetic AI that messages with young women and curates the internet for them like a big sister would. So what we do is we text message content to you based on your moods and emotions. So if you're going through a breakup, if you're getting a new job, whatever it is that you're going through, our digital personality, Blue, and a group of humans will message with you and help you get that right video, that right podcast, whatever it is that you need to be a badass.
Very cool. Amy?
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Wan. I'm co-founder and CEO of SageWise. SageWise is business legal infrastructure for blockchain and smart contract companies. So I don't know how many people in here are familiar with blockchain smart contracts, but smart contracts are basically, they're if-then code, if A, then B, right? But unfortunately, because they're written in code, they're very rigid. And so, unfortunately, you will see things like coding bugs. People will need to upgrade, amend, modify their smart contracts. There will be genuine disputes over their smart contracts. And so we basically build dispute resolution infrastructure for smart contracts that operate on the blockchain.
Very cool. Daniela?
Yeah, I'm Daniela Corrente. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reel. The reason why we started the company is because 85% of Americans are living with financial anxiety, okay? We all have struggled with debt at some point, but we are also humans, and we're also aspirational, so we're always gonna want things. But just giving you different ways to achieve your aspirations, it's not something that's been so prominent in the market in the past couple of years, so that's why what Real does is that we make it very simple to set money aside towards your purchases. Call it a new handbag, a pair of shoes, soon even Botox or freezing your eggs, right? We're working towards make it simple and automizing savings so that you can avoid unnecessary debt while still living the life that you want to live.
Cool.
My name is Era. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Seed. I started Seed, I'm in the bacteria business. I started Seed mostly because I think women find their way to their body in two different ways, through pathology or pregnancy. You either get sick or knocked up, and other than that, you really spend most of your life really not understanding how your body works. Through my, I would say, both existential crises of wanting to create something that was incredibly impactful and meaningful in the world after building 2 other startups, I think I also, through my experience of pregnancy, realized that there was this massive space between science and the products and the information that's marketed to us. And we spend, as women, not just for ourselves, but on our children and our families, so much money on products that are literally bullshit. And I found my way through breastfeeding to the microbiome, which is the 38 trillion microorganisms that live in and on our body that are incredibly, you're about 3 to 5 pounds bacteria. For anyone trying to lose weight, you don't want to lose that weight. It's incredibly impactful in so many areas of our bodies, but also incredibly important part of why breastfeeding is meaningful. And after not being able to breastfeed after 4 months, I realized I really just wanted to reinvent infant formula. It is probably one of the most critical windows where you can make an impact on the programming of a child's immune system and how their microbiome develops. And that led me on a 3-year journey really into the world of probiotics, putting the best scientists together in the microbial sciences and microbiome field. But also as an entrepreneur, probiotics are the fastest growing consumer health category in the world, $57 billion market. They are also growing because they are poorly regulated, and people think probiotics are sparkly beverages and chocolate, mattresses, shampoo, and you name it, anything else, someone will put it on a label. So we work to use the microbiome to create a whole new lens with which people can look at their bodies and understand their health and hopefully become really awesome citizen scientists of their own health and the choices they make every day, and also create a new standard in precision and efficacy of what probiotics actually really are according to the world of science.
I think about this a lot because I was an attorney for a decade before I started The Riveter, which is sometimes not the most fun job. But I often think, I think it's helpful to everyone to understand, what did you do before you started your company, and what kind of pushed you over the edge to go into entrepreneurship?
That's a great question. I think I always was an entrepreneur. I've been trying to think back on have I had any bosses? And other than for odd jobs, not really in my career. So I went to USC, fight on, graduated from USC, and then started my own production company right out of school. And so I was a filmmaker before I was an entrepreneur, but it's a type of entrepreneur when you're in independent filmmaking. So I started a production company, made a feature film, got that on Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, returned my investors' money, which was a miracle in the indie film world, and then decided that was really unscalable and unsustainable, and then started Blue Fever. And I also started Blue Fever because in my production company, I was the only woman. So I started it with a group of young men and dealt with a lot of Me Too moments. And I wanted to work with more women. And so I met my business partner in line for a movie at the Sundance Film Festival. And that's how we got together and had a shared vision, and that's how we started Blue Fever.
Great.
I'm also a Trojan, a double Trojan. So I went to USC undergrad, USC Law, and started my career out as an attorney. I was out in DC for a couple years. If any of you guys know the Presidential Management Fellowship program, it's basically an accelerated managerial program that takes you through federal government. So my concentration was international trade and regulatory affairs. And then I met my husband while I was in DC, and he was a med student at the time, and he matched for residency out here in LA. So I was happy to move back to LA, but I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life in DC. So when I moved back to LA, literally I had no idea what I was going to do, and then kind of got into the startup industry. I became a general counsel at a local real estate crowdfunding startup, and then I transitioned to be partner at a law firm. And after about a year at the law firm, I was like, you know, this is not really what I went to law school for. I don't really enjoy sitting here and helping like rich clients get richer.
I feel you.
And I would have like legitimate smaller clients who like, they just wanted to raise like a couple $100,000 and they couldn't use me because I would have billed too much. And I was like, this is not what I went to law school for, and there's an access to justice problem, and this is just not scalable. And I think I've always just seen law in a very different light. And so when I initially started my company, our first name was Bootstrap Legal, and we were basically automating what I used to do as an attorney. And then I got pregnant.
I've done that too.
And before finding out I was pregnant, I had this idea in my head of like this really large, ambitious thing that could be done with this like burgeoning blockchain industry. And I was like, it's an ambitious idea. It's like so moonshot. And I was actually trying to convince one of my other friends to do it because I was like, I don't want to pivot. And like, I frankly don't know how I would make this work. And then when I got pregnant, I was like, well, now I am a solo pregnant minority female founder. I'm probably like as unfundable as they come. So I was like, well, I might as well just like go for it then, because I have like nothing to lose now. So I did it, and now I have a co-founder, and we raised a seed round. I raised the seed round while I was pregnant and with a newborn. So yeah, that's
Well
our story.
done.
That's great. That's really good. So my previous life, I used to be in advertising. I lived in New York for many years, and I was doing campaigns for most of the products that you see out there, like Olay, facial creams, right? Maybelline, like you name it. And while being in advertising, I also was a bit bored because I spent too many hours just pushing pixels around, and I've always been very curious. And one memory that I always had in my head, I'm originally from South America. I'm from Venezuela. Any Latin people here? Woo! And when I moved to the US, I moved here for college, and all of a sudden I was told that I needed to get a credit card because that's the only way that I would get a credit score, right? I'm the first one in my family to move here. I have no idea. I'm in college. I got a $2,000 car, and all of a sudden I felt $2,000 richer. Right, and I was just swiping and having fun and like sponsoring a child in Guatemala and doing all these things, really. And all of a sudden, I started getting the bills and realizing APR and things that nobody have ever told me. So I've always been very passionate about people's relationship with their finances. And then while working in New York in advertising, I found out that 63% of millennials do not have credit cards. And that's very different nowadays than what it was, you know, in 2001, 2002, when I got my credit card. So I just went to SurveyMonkey, put a survey out there out of curiosity, and started asking around to my friends, to everybody that I would meet, how do you manage your finances, right? You look great. Those boots are amazing. I want them. They're for $500. How do you pay for them if you are dealing with student loans and you have an entry-level salary, right? And found it fascinating, the lengths that people would go to achieve the things that they want or to live a certain way. And that's where the idea of Real came about, and I just couldn't help it. I had to do it. I went to South by Southwest with business cards and a website that I put in 5 minutes on Squarespace and pretended to have a startup.
It's great.
And talked to people like if it existed, and people liked it. So I'm like, okay, there is something here. I quit my full-time, started freelancing and doing this on the side, and then started having more and more customers, and now it's been 2 years of a full-on journey. Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, I had my first conscious commerce company in 5th grade where I was selling rainforest t-shirts. Although I did figure out how to make some margin in there also, which I'm still very proud of to this day, because our margins at Seed right now are not very good. The most of high school, I spent kind of coming up with interesting bulk ways of purchasing marijuana for the rich kids in my high school. And that was probably my first foray into bulk pricing and packaging and user experience design.
All experience is good experience.
And I am also a recovering filmmaker, so I spent most of my 20s making feature films. Also never really had a traditional job. I interned for Harvey. Anyone can ask me about that after. And definitely learned that I loved storytelling. I produced 10 feature films, and I ran a film fund, and I think I realized that producing really was just like a crazy hustle. And it was everything from raising the money to finishing it. And what I didn't love about independent film was that you didn't control the way it went out into the world. It's a little different, of course, now with social media, but and obviously there's different platforms, but it was really an exercise in slaving over something that you then didn't kind of control the destiny of, although I'm very proud of the films I made. And the last film that I made was an adaptation. I did mostly features, and I made one documentary, which was an adaptation of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of the United States, which is a book that fundamentally changed my life in high school. It was the true history of this country. It was not the history told from the victors. It was the history told through the letters and the songs and the poems and the words of the people that really lived through and fought for so many of the civil liberties and the things we enjoy today. But I did it with Lupe Fiasco and Eddie Vedder and Bob Dylan and Springsteen and all these incredible actors and Sean Penn and these incredible actors that we were able to bring history to life through art. And I think that was one of my first realizations. Two things. One, Howard passed away while we were finishing the movie, and he was really one of my mentors and people I was so inspired by, because he was a lifelong activist and someone who always stood up for and lived a truth that I've kind of been unparalleled in terms of a lot of people have been in my life. And I really realized that ultimately what I really wanted to do was control the destiny and do something that was really impactful. Definitely ended up in a path that I didn't expect, which was in e-commerce, which is kind of ironic, but I definitely learned how to cultivate big audiences and build brands and think about how people experience products, and then how you can use those platforms to storytell and to make an impact, and to use the selling a piece of jewelry to also kind of get your feminist agenda through. And so after a couple companies, I realized that ultimately, kind of what I said earlier, why I started Seed, you can only sell so much and do so much until you really ultimately need to do it yourself, do it by yourself on your own terms, in your own way. And health and biology, my mom died when I was 17 of cancer very, very quickly, and I was an athlete, and I think the body is just something that I've always been has always been like a driver in my life of something that I knew a lot of people didn't know enough about, and I felt like where I could make the biggest impact was in health. And so that's what led me to Seed.
Amazing. These are incredible stories. It's so exciting to hear them. What has been the most unexpectedly hard thing about starting your company? And if you could take that and give some advice to everyone in the room. I think like every part of it is incredibly hard, but if you could give one example.
Building team at the beginning, it's hard because you have to understand that you hire very differently when you're building a team of 5 people than when you have a company that's 100 plus, right? I was talking about it with somebody from my team this morning, and it's when I used to work in advertising and it was 1,500 people, right? I used to be part of the hiring process. I had a team under me. I didn't have to deal with HR, okay? I didn't have to do all of those hard conversations and really follow through every single day with their evolution and be that invested. When you build an early stage team, you want to be invested in their growth because their growth is ultimately your growth, but at the same time, you have 150 other things that you're doing, right? So finding the people that are hustlers at the beginning and that understand that you have to wear many hats and that we appreciate initiative and we appreciate when people just come up with innovative solutions. It's not a one-way street, it's not a 9 to 5, right? That to me, it's the hardest.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to agree with you. I think everything's hard, right? And I think different things are hard at different times, and every company has different challenges. So like the previous thing I was working on, Bootstrap Legal, like we got to revenue pretty quickly, right? And that's just because the product that we were selling was different. But raising for that was very hard because the total addressable market was small. Whereas what we're doing now, the total addressable market is potentially huge, but it's right now we're trying really hard to find product market fit and to get to revenue because the blockchain space is a very unique one. Everyone in this industry is trying to build what the new internet is going to look like, and no one knows what it's going to look like, right? And so you literally have to sit there and have a lot of conversations and guess, like, this is what we think the future of this technology is going to look like.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think there's like one more professional business one that's hard and one that's more personal. The first is that it's very hard to work in science in consumer health. We are up against people spending millions and millions and millions of dollars who aren't doing the right thing. So they push the boundaries of what the FTC says you can do. They push the boundaries of what the FDA says you can do. Every day those people are raising millions and millions of dollars, and you're watching the headlines and you're watching how their growth is going, and you're saying you're playing the long game. And that's very challenging. It means that you can't do some of the things that in the interweb you could do to get someone to purchase something. It means that you're taking a much longer view, but also, of course, in the short term, maybe it's not as sexy as like some of my previous companies where you could scale really fast. And so I think that daily kind of maintaining the integrity between what's right and what we believe is ethical and what we believe is more integrous to the science and what is short-term and opportunistic and what would grow the company faster. And I think those two things, at least at the beginning, are going to be at odds with each other and be a point of friction.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything everybody said so far. I think my mic's on this side, so if I'm talking over here, it's just so that sorry about that. I mean, I think that the hardest thing that I did not anticipate was how closely tied my personal journey and growth as a person would be to my company, and how every bump in the road with my company was actually like a, there's one of my advisors and coaches clapping very loudly, that I don't think that I realized that like when I was afraid to do something. So I was in Techstars. It's one of the largest accelerators in the world. Plug for you, Anna. And when we were there, we were told, hey guys, you have this great idea. You have some traction, but you need to grow. And I think that we were really afraid to grow because I was really afraid, well, what if this doesn't work? And that was my own personal fear, right? And once I worked through that personal fear, I was able to grow to 10,000 users in like a month and a half, right? But I think that it's all, I did not anticipate how closely tied my company's struggles would be to my struggles. And I think everybody up here, it's very clear that we started these companies for very personal reasons, and so it's just all intertwined, and I didn't anticipate how difficult that would be to parse out.
I think that's a great anecdote and so important. I definitely feel it. So I have 3 little girls who are 4, 2, and 1, and my company has grown really fast. And I talk to a lot of moms who are starting companies, and I feel the weight of the pressure of succeeding. Like we have to do it. We're up against a different bar, which leads to the other question. What do you think we can do to move more quickly to a more gender equitable arena in the entrepreneurial world? I mean, we know the numbers for women in startups in each of the past 2 years. All women teams have received less than 3% of venture capital dollars. And obviously it needs to change.
Yeah. I think it's more female VCs and angels, to be perfectly honest. The majority of investors in my company, I mean, we're essentially building like the new emotional internet, and pitching that to a man we've gotten some confused looks before, right? But there are definitely really awesome and enlightened men who have invested in our company that we love working with, but I think that having those women at an early stage see an earlier version of themselves in you was huge for us. And if we didn't have female investors, I don't know where we'd be.
You know, I think kind of going back to what you were saying, mindset is everything, right? And as much as popular media likes to sit there and say, oh, like the men don't give us a chance, blah, 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 we're excluded. Like, yes, that happens. And you just have to work through it. But I think that's only half the issue. And the other half is women need to also stick their necks out there. And I think we also have to look internally, right? Like, I know when I started my company, like I went to my business coach and I was like, oh, I think I would like to raise $30,000. And she's like, why so little? And I was like, but that seems like a lot. And I was like, it's in the blockchain industry, we have this phrase FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt. And I think the one thing I've learned is that your mental attitude, your mental mind frame sets the tone for everything. And your battle is not your competitors, it's not the VCs out there, it's not what, your battle is your brain and yourself, right? And so whatever it takes, whether that means hiring a business coach or like sitting there and journaling every day or like joining a self-help group, whatever it is, like whatever it takes to rewrite your mental narrative, that's, I think, what will get more women entrepreneurs out there.
I'm going to piggyback off of that really quickly because I've spent my career in media, and media is telling us that we cannot do what we want to do. Media is telling us that we are not as powerful as we are every single day in very conscious and subconscious ways. So what you're saying is absolutely true, and until you position your brain correctly and you surround yourself with the right people, right, who are telling you you can, the world is actually like created to tell you that you can if you're a woman.
I would just add, a couple of things. One is, I think women are so susceptible to just kind of literally hand their power over to somebody, and I think it's kind of similar to what you're saying, but I think especially when I mentor like younger female entrepreneurs, and even amongst my friends, we talk about this all the time, and it's kind of what you were saying, which is that, if you allow that narrative to persist, it certainly does. And so I think it's that first practice of saying like, well, how do I not give that power away so easily? And I also think secondarily that it is a lot of women being really responsible to other women. And I think that's if you're a woman that runs a media organization and all you talk about is how women are defeated, I don't know if that story's been told. So like, what's the next story? And not just creating a lot of lists celebrating female entrepreneurs and a bunch of female dinners that are only women and a bunch of, I don't know if that separatism, because all the things I get invited to, I have a male co-founder who went to USC. I don't know if all of that separatism ultimately, if it's more important for there to be equal men and women at the Goldman Sachs conference, the tech conference in Vegas, or if it's that women just have all their own conferences, because I think that kind of separatism is kind of hypocritical. It's saying we're communing at the exclusion of. And of course, there's community building and there's moments where that is important, but if men started saying there's all male things, I'm not sure that that's where we're headed. And so I think, or that's where the greatest amount of progress is going to come from. I've had a very opposite experience. I couldn't get a woman to invest in this company, and I started it to literally reinvent breast milk out of my pregnancy experience. More men were supportive of this company. I worked very hard to get women on our cap table. I work very hard today. I lowered the check size. I have done everything I could, but women were more challenging. I had women say, oh, another woman in our portfolio said you're competitive to them, and therefore we can't take capital. We can't give you capital. Which, by the way, with no diligence, and the truth is we weren't competitive. And so I've actually think that there's a real responsibility amongst ourselves of how, coming from entertainment, I had more problems with other female executives at film companies being not kind and inclusive of me than I did from men. Now, what their motivation was, what that was, sure, those are all, I have a Me Too folder in a Hotmail address somewhere, sure. But I'm not sure if all the conversations that are having today and all the memes that we're participating in that kind of don't feel like they're evolving, I don't know, and I don't have all the answers, but I don't know if, you have to start somewhere, but I don't know if that's what's going to ultimately move everything forward.
Yeah, 100% agree. For us, have been easier also to find investors that are male. Throughout my career in advertising, also my biggest mentors were mostly male. Most affinity with them in general, like better feedback. It's hard because we need to work together in order to be inclusive and not separate ourselves. I find that with the Me Too movement, we've seen a lot of separation too, and it's important that we acknowledge that what we want is equality, right? Nobody's better than each other, and we need to lead by example. And it's very, very, very easy to find excuses that somebody didn't write you a check because X, Y, and Z. That's why you need to be in the right mindset when it comes to running a company, because you have to be true to yourself. It said that I didn't have the right numbers, right? It said that I need to pivot the story this way. What is it that I need to do in order to make this story appealing, instead of sitting down in a corner and being like, I'm a female Latina and nobody wants to give me a check, right? I mean, yeah, it's sad, but it's only a little bit over 50 female Latinas that have raised over $1 million. I'm really happy to be one of them, but we need to be out there in order to get more checks. Yeah? We just need to be out there. We just need to be out there.
I just wanted to piggyback off of something you said earlier about seclusion, right? And I think that's a really good point. And there is a time and place for seclusion. Like we do have to sit down around the table and talk, and it is very therapeutic. But at the same time, like, for example, I'm talking about the blockchain industry again. The blockchain industry, it's actually way more male than the traditional startup industry, right?
Which is hard.
There are even fewer female founders in the blockchain industry than the regular startup industry, because everyone thinks you have to be technical and you don't have to be. But one thing I would notice is now, like, in an effort to get more female representation at all these blockchain conferences, they have the Women in Blockchain panel. And I'm like, no, like, we women are good enough to sit on the substantive panels as opposed to being on our Women in Blockchain panel and talk about the female experience. I don't know what to say about the female experience necessarily. And guess what? During that panel is when all the men walk out of the room and they network, right?
Yeah.
So I will, so
I literally just saw that at another conference. They had like a women in tech panel, and like everyone went to go get coffee. So you're like,
So my policy now is, if you're going to ask me to sit on a Women in Blockchain panel, I want to sit on a substantive panel as well.
Yep. That's great. That's a really good policy.
Or I go a little further, which is I actually ask if there's going to be a women in whatever panel, and I don't go to the conference because I try and work with the organizers, and I say, like, this is not helping anyone.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Like recently I got, by a really big publication, asked to write a piece, but it was on how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. And they sent me references, and all of the references that they sent me were from other female CEOs. So I wrote back, and I'm like, can you send me reference of male CEOs that have grown in this piece? They're like, no, it's female focused. I'm like, I'm not writing of only how hard it is to be a female CEO. I'm a CEO, regardless of my gender. So I'm declining.
And it's hard for everyone.
It's
hard for everyone. You're going to have challenges. Like, there are men who have far more challenges because, you know, their ego gets in the way, or they don't have product market fit. No, but I'm serious. I mean, and women whose ego gets in the way. I mean, there's so many things that can get in your way besides your, you know, gender.
Yeah.
It's an important conversation. I think ultimately, in many ways, both things are true. And sometimes it's great to be with women in a safe space, or there's some magic to it. And it's incredibly important that we include all genders in these conversations, because nothing will change if we don't.
Well, it's healing first. I mean, I think that there's a place for healing. When you're talking about one woman, you know, the women in media not being kind to one another, that's because there was a narrative that there's one woman at the top. You know what I mean? So you had to defend yourself. But I think now that narrative is changing, and we can come together, and we need to heal those wounds and heal those behaviors and those ideologies. But then we need to go out and we need to have our male allies, because there are lots of men who want to support female entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but then we can't be super mad about it when they want to go and be by themselves and have a space to talk. Like, you can't have it both ways. So that's all that's all I mean.
But this is why we need Blue Fever.
Yes.
Moving on.
Just talk to us. We'll help you through.
We've touched on money, which is a topic I think all of us as entrepreneurs think about a lot. I do. So have you raised, and kind of what were the rounds? And I think it's important to think about, how did you choose your investors? A lot of times I think we approach raising money from a place of we don't have any power, but ultimately we do. So how did you choose your investors?
not all money is good money.
Yes.
Start from that and be very selective. You are going to have to report to those people quarterly or even more often than that. You are going to have to rely on them for connections, mentorship, whatever it is that you want out of those investors. The way that I structure the investors that we have, I have investors that are really good at product, fantastic. Investors that are really good at networking and making introductions on the investment side, and investors that are good at making introductions on the brand side, right? Because that's what we needed. And I know, and I've learned that throughout the process of fundraising and engaging with them, that you cannot expect the same for each one of them, right? The one that is good at introductions, that's what they're good at. Don't go at them for products because you're gonna leave more confused that you enter that meeting, right? So just keep that in mind when you fundraise. Really, I know that when you fundraise it's because you need money to move forward, but pay attention and ask a lot of questions to the people you're taking money from, because there are some red flags that you will see that it's like, okay, you haven't even written me a check and you're already trying to change the idea. I don't want your money, right? Or you are already telling me exactly who I need to push in my team. Or you need to really be honest with yourself and what you're looking for.
I mean, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them, right?
100%.
They're coming into your family or your, maybe sports team is a better analogy, but they're going to be voting, right? They're going to be voting on what you do with your company. They're going to be voting on what you do with your company. That's a really big deal. And for us, we made sure that people believed in us and our vision, and then we took their money, because we didn't want to have to deal with phone calls and emails about people being like, go in this direction, because ultimately you're going to be wasting your time, managing those investors. And like Daniela said, you want those investors to help you and to lift you up. You don't want to have to babysit them or have to fight them for what your vision is, because you already pitched their vision. You got that, right? And that's your job.
We took this is not my first startup, so there was a lot of learnings and mistakes that went into our current cap table. I knew I needed to look at the cap table and smile. I knew that it needed to feel like a community. We decided, at least in our early stages, to build this first kind of grassroots marketing cohort of people that were going to be incredibly impactful and supportive, a phone call, a text away, people that we knew really believed, particularly when it's really early, it's usually not just in the idea, it's usually in you. And so these are people that I've kind of accumulated a lot of my life, and who come from those people that you've accumulated over many years. We allowed tiny check sizes for people where it could be really impactful and exciting for them to say that they invested in their first startup. So we lowered the threshold. We capped the first checks in such a way that nobody had any rights. No one had any say in what we were doing, how we were using the money, what were the decisions we were making. We're doing around now where it will be exactly the same. And that's mostly because we really have a lot of conviction about the vision. We did the same thing where we looked at the different verticals that we're in, life science, consumer health, brand, influencers, and people who could bring incredibly impactful audiences to the community, to the brand, and humans that have had health experiences that have led them in some way to the microbiome, and where they were excited that what we're doing aligns with something that was important for their health journey. We have a really big angel who struggled with Crohn's disease, for example, was in and out of the hospital for a couple years, and then after trying many things, tried our product and has never had experience like that. Now that's anecdotal and not supported by our science, but those are the people that energetically also give us money because we have made an impact in their life. So and a lot of them, and then I would say there's a handful of angels on our cap table that are just my best friends. Or good friends that qualify as an accredited investor, and I do that because this, to your point, building a company is an incredibly intimate personal experience. We're first principles thinkers. I think this whole has to be this fund, and we have a lot of sexy funds too, but at the end of the day, this is hopefully my last one, and I think there's a real existential experiment for us as a company, which is, could this all look and be done differently? And so I would just say, don't also prescribe to the way everybody else raises money is probably the best thing I would say.
Yeah, it's so different.
And if I'm building on that, listen to the market. If you have many meetings and you're getting the same feedback, then you need to really reassess and change the story and tweak the story. The story that you tell the first day that you go racing is totally different than the story that you say by pitch number 20 because you're learning, you're grasping. If you're not learning and you're not grasping, then you're probably not going to get that money.
And you know what one of our advisors said to us recently, to piggyback off of you now, is that when you are communicating and practicing communicating your story, you're actually developing strategy, right? They go hand in hand. So like if you wait and you figure out everything, and you should figure it out to the extent that you can, but then go practice. I mean, practice on investors, right, who like may not invest in you, but they're going to be great practice investors because they're going to give you a lot of feedback, and then they're going to help you reassess that strategy and reassess how you're communicating it, because your job is to tell a story really well.
I would add just one thing too, which is that it's marketing. If you think about investors are just the marketing cohort, they're just an audience. Like, what is the user experience? What does it look like? What does it feel like when you send the deck? What do you follow up with? Do you send something physical? Do you write a beautiful personal note? Do you know something about them from social media that you're able to tap into? Like, it's all, I don't mean that in a manipulative way. I mean, this is a genuinely human to human experience. It's the same thing as when someone's buying your product, there's an exchange, they're giving you money. And so we think a lot about what that experience looks like and how somebody, an investor can also
It can
see
be highly
it.
emotional.
Yeah, it's
you know what I
incredibly,
mean? Like
yeah.
you're talking about your investor who had Crohn's disease and then tried to, that's a highly emotional experience to, you know, to have that physical change.
I'll add two things. One is, CRM, because you will talk to a ton of investors and you'll get a ton of rejections, and you just need some nice way to like keep track of all of that. And the second thing is how you structure your investment, right? So when we pivoted to SageWise late last year, that's when the ICO craze was going crazy. ICOs are initial coin offerings. Like last year, technologists thought that they invented a new way of raising money, and they raised billions upon billions of dollars before the SEC came down and was like, "This is illegal." But so yeah, illegal-ish, depending on how you do it. But at that time, basically, you could go out with a white paper and a fancy website and be like, "We're gonna build all this stuff that's like crazy and unfeasible," and people would like just literally give you millions. Like there was one startup that raised $4 billion with no product. Right? I know, it's crazy. And so we were like, okay, we're going to ICO too. And I went out and I talked to some in the industry, we call them whales, like people with a lot of, they're crypto rich, right? And they were like, okay, cool, but we want massive discounts and instant liquidity. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a securities attorney, and I know that's illegal, even though at that time the SEC hadn't really been clear about it, right? And I was like, and I was like, this, A, is a pump and dump scheme, and B, you don't have to believe in me or my co-founder or my company to make this kind of investment, right? And so that, there's this whole rhetoric or dialogue right now about sometimes VCs are evil, stuff like that, but at the same time, VCs, the way they're structured, they have to sit by you and for the long run, because they don't get liquidity, and they have to help you build your company, right? And it's not an instant cash thing for them. So that's the one good thing. Yeah, there's many good things about VCs, but that's one good thing about VCs is it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna invest. I don't need to care about your company. I'm just gonna cash out. People who are long-term investors who have to sit there and help you in order to realize a financial gain, I think that sort of financial structure pays a lot of dividends in the future. So we ended up not doing the ICO, and we did a more creative type of traditional structuring.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. We're out of time. I could talk all day to all of you. I hope you guys learned as much as I did, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.